Let's unbox the Hot Wheels Starships Select A-Wing Fighter. Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it. Hello there, thanks for visiting Varykino. Here in New Zealand, it's Saturday, and you know what that means? A trip to our local mall to hunt for new Star Wars toys, and we didn't come away disappointed. We finally tracked down the Hot Wheels Starships Select A-Wing Fighter. Now, this is part of the recent wave, which we had found already, but somehow we had missed the A-Wing. It seems to be popular here for us, so thankfully we were able to find it at a different toy store during our hunting today, and I'm really excited to open it up. I love this line. I have opened up quite a few already, and I'm excited to add another one. Of course, this one is slightly older, but the wave that this one was originally a part of never made it to us here in New Zealand. Certainly, we never found it, so I'm really happy to see it being reissued in the most recent wave, so people like us that missed out that first time can finally add it to our collections, and I'm really excited. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, of course, I'm going to open it up. We'll take a look at all of the details and the paint applications. But first, let's take one last look at the packaging. I really do like the packaging style that Mattel uses for the Hot Wheels Starships Select line. I actually kept mine in their boxes for quite a while before the temptation finally got to me and I started opening mine all up. And of course, the packaging has been very consistent ever since that first wave, with the exception of a few convention exclusives. I love the fact how uniform they look when you line them all up here. We have a fantastic large window that wraps around on both sides, which lets in a good amount of light, though of course we don't have a top window there, but we can still see the vehicle in there. We've sort of got it from the top down, pointing up towards the top right there. I like the angle for this particular ship. Of course, the A-Wing is a little bit more flat, so tipping it up on its side like that lets us see a lot of those top surface details. Really nice if you want to keep yours in the box. We have the Star Wars logo here up in black and white, and of course we have the Hot Wheels Starships Select logo there underneath the window, and the ship name A-Wing Fighter there. On the top, because we don't have a window, we have some interesting printed graphics. We have a black and white blueprint style artwork here of the top of the A-Wing, and we have the faction logo in red, which of course is the Rebellion or Rebel Alliance Starbird there in red. On the cardboard hanger here, we have the number for this particular vehicle, number 19, and again the ship name A-Wing Fighter there. Moving on to the back. Now, as I mentioned, I bought this one in the most recent wave, which is a reissue, not the original one. So we can see some of the other ships pictured here from this most recent wave. Of course, Darth Vader's TIE Advanced is also a reissue. We have the original Trilogy AT-ST, the fantastic New Republic E-Wing Fighter, and the very interesting prototype version of the Imperial Shuttle. Now, I have opened up all of these, and if you are interested, I'll have them all linked down below in case you want to check those out. Of course, the large image here shows the A-Wing Fighter on the included display stand, which has a ball-shaped attachment so we can rotate the ship 360 degrees there. We can see some of those details on the bases there. We've also got that faction logo printed there on the base. I love the bases from this range, really nice. The rest of the packaging is just, of course, the Mattel logo, a lot of barcode stuff, copyright warning, all of that kind of stuff that has to be included on modern toy packaging. Of course, I think it looks pretty cool, but I now have almost all of my Hot Wheels Starship Select vehicles out of their boxes, so it's time for this one to get out of the box and join my collection. So now I have the A-Wing out of the packaging, as well as the box containing the pieces that make up the display stand. But very quickly, I just want to show the cardboard insert that was in behind the vehicle inside the box. I really like this. This is a repeating blueprint style black and white artwork of the Star Wars ships that were in this particular assortment. We can see Darth Vader's TIE Advanced, AT-ST, the New Republic E-Wing, the Imperial Shuttle, and of course the A-Wing there. This is a really fun item to cut out and keep if you want to discard the rest of your box. I always love seeing artwork of Star Wars ships, so this was a really fun sort of assortment to keep there. So of course, let's get on to the main attraction, the A-Wing itself. Every time I open these ones up, it's really interesting to feel how heavy they are in the hand, because of course they are die-cast metal. Now, some of them do have plastic components, and you could see even through those clear plastic windows there on the front of the box that this one one does actually include some plastic. Of course, when we see it from this side, you can really see that these back fins here around the engines, this is plastic. So I'm not sure if this is for safety reasons or just because we've got this very narrow ring here that for manufacturing purposes that this is done as a plastic piece here. So we'll have a look at closer to see where the sort of the difference between plastic and metal is in terms of the sculpting lines. But yes, not full metal on this one, but that isn't to say that it feels light or really looks plasticky. It still has quite a weight to it. Not the heaviest, because of course it is a little bit of a thinner, flatter ship, but it does still have a nice weight to it. So of course the A-Wing is kind of a smaller ship compared to some others, but that's kind of the fun thing about the Starships Select line, is that they're not in scale to each other. They're kind of an approximate size. But even when it was in its box, it looked a little bit smaller than the rest of the packaging. But I think that that's fair. I don't want the A-Wing to look kind of too big when I eventually put it alongside all of the other Hot Wheels ships that I have. So this is really fun. I was so sad to miss an original trilogy ship. When it was first released, I hunted high and low, so I was so excited to see that it was going to be included in a reissue in the new assortment, which I was able to find in New Zealand. Took a little bit of hunting. I found some of the others first. I'm sure there were other New Zealand collectors that were hunting for this one just as I was. This is really fun. So let's go over the details, because this one has a lot of weathering. So I was able to see a couple. The store that I actually found this one in had two, and I noticed that the weathering on them was actually quite varied between the two, and this is the one that I chose out of the two. So just to quickly jump to it, we can see that there is kind of like a bit of a dark grey, almost a brown weathering that looks like it has been brush applied here. And then not really on much else of the ship. We've just kind of got this painting here. There is weathering on the rest of the ship, but actually seeing it in person, I can actually see the very fine digital printing dots on most of this light grey and even on the dark areas here, because I noticed these two dark sort of carbon scoring sort of laser cannon hits here were exactly the same. The other ship that I left behind on the shelf had this kind of weathering kind of done in a weird brush effect over on this side. Interestingly, this one doesn't have that sort of weathering applied here at all. So personally, I thought this one was a little bit tidier. I didn't like the fact that I could see the brush strokes on the weathering on that particular ship. So I thought that was really interesting. Usually I find the weathering across the Starships Select line to be very consistent, especially because, as we can see on this one, a lot of it is actually printed. And then of course we have the blaster damage, the battle variants that do look like some kind of sort of decal or sort of digital printing with those sort of fiery blaster effects on them. Those are not hand done either. So I thought it was really interesting that this one just has that one singular little hand applied section there. Of course, when it was in the packaging, it was sort of packaged like that. You can't see the underside. So we can see that that printed weathering is continuous along the bottom as well, which I really like to see, because that is an element that you can't see when it's in the box. Of course, when it's on the display stand, I'm probably going to have it looking like this. So I'm not really going to see the underside, but I think for collectors, they just feel a little bit more complete because we've got all of this fantastic sculpted detail. We've got all these detail lines. Of course, we've got some rivets there to attach all of the pieces together. That's kind of, you can't avoid that when it comes to toys. There has to be some element of construction. They're hidden nicely there on the underside, but I just like the fact that the painting is continuous and we really have that following through with all of this digital printing. Really fun. So let's go over all of that. I just wanted to sort of touch on some of the things that I thought were really interesting, the things that sort of grabbed my attention first out of the box. So of course, original trilogy paint job here. We've got this really, really rich kind of dark red color, which is fantastic. A really nice contrast to the sort of the cream color. It's not a stark white, just a little hint of warmth, which I think works well with the plastic here as well. We've got a pretty good color match. You can kind of tell the difference between a color of plastic versus the color of the paint that they use on this line, but it's a pretty good match really overall. And of course we've got this fantastic red color used in a few different places. So I think looking at the construction up close, it's a little bit hard to tell. I want to say that these parts here, looking at the actual sort of material of it, I want to say that these sort of engines here are metal. That's just the way that they feel to my hand. And it's just these fins here in this white plastic and this ring. That's what feels plastic to me. This part here feels metal, which is really nice. And if we can sort of see that we've got the same paint here than we do here. So there's a really nice color matching there as well. A little bit darker here because we actually have a little bit of sort of like a striped wash over the top, like sort of like a battle damage that's kind of come back from the cockpit, which gives it a darker effect. Kind of, yeah, that's interesting. I think that's a dark gray. I couldn't quite see that through the box, but yeah. And we've got, I think that's maybe just a tiny scratch there in the paint. I can't feel it with my fingernail, but we've got a little dot there just catching the light, which is a little bit unfortunate. Every now and again, we are going to find little scratches. Of course, these are mass produced, but that's kind of one of the benefits to having such intense weathering on a ship like this is, you know, a few dings and scratches are going to be part of an actual battle-worn ship. And it's very minimal. I'm probably going to have the ship posed facing forward where I'm not really going to see it. And unfortunately, I have seen, you know, one or two, like I said, this one had some weathering that I didn't like. In terms of the actual paint application, this tiny little scratch, that's not going to bother me. So I really like that red. It's not quite, it's fairly seated in the sculpting line here, but it's not the crispest paint line that I have seen across the Hot Wheels Starships Select line. We can kind of see over here, it's just a little bit outside that sculpting line, and then in here is kind of a little bit more in that line. So it's not dead straight here. We've just got this little kind of tiny little wobble along this edge, but it's not like, you know, if I tried to do that by hand, it would probably be very, very wobbly. It doesn't really sort of draw my eye. I am looking very close up because, of course, I'm looking and I'm seeing the digital printing dots here on this sort of pale gray weathering here. I can just sort of feel the texture of the paint applied over that base color there. But I really do like this kind of little scattered little squiggly sort of little scratches that have been applied with this sort of darker grey paint. And of course we've got these sort of blaster hits here as well, which kind of have a little bit of a cast off, like something sort of, you know, hit, and then we kind of get that sort of flashing sort of back towards from the opposite direction from the hit. I like that. It's just kind of not just a straight circle. I like the sort of little bit of variance there. Of course we've got different shapes there, and this one kind of feels like, one of the things that I thought when I saw this is it's like it's hit some sort of, you know, fuel line or sort of some sort of fluid that's kind of hit here, and it's kind of leaked back across the surface of the ship as it's been flying. It just sort of felt somehow like, you know, someone's really thought about what's going on with this blaster hit here and with that weathering there. I just thought that was really fun. And of course we've even got a little bit here on these fins as well, so they don't look too stark and clean. We've got these sort of little lines on both sides there, not perfectly symmetrical, which I like, and they're also on the inside surfaces as well, so nothing looks terribly clean. I think one of the only sort of few parts that looks clean are these sort of red engine bits, because these white sort of end caps here around the engine, they aren't really weathered or anything like that, so they do look very white. But of course we've got these really cool engine detail parts here, which do have some accents there. We've got some light grey, sort of a mid-grey, accenting inside the sort of engine parts and across the back here. Not much in the way of weathering. Sometimes the Hot Wheels Starships Select have sort of like an overall wash that kind of highlights all of the sculpting lines. This one doesn't look like it has a wash, except for around sort of this red part. I noticed that sort of darker grey paint there, but actually looking at it, there's a really subtle, sort of like really subtle grey sort of wash on the nose here. Every now and again it just sort of catches the light, like this section here, and there's a little bit kind of on the nose around here. It's really subtle. I really like that. Just kind of tones it down, makes it look a little less stark and clean, where we just have sort of the cream and red just sort of being quite a contrast. I like the sort of little paint touches that just kind of blend it all together. So these parts are plastic, but now of course when I'm looking at it, Of course, these laser cannons are also plastic. They have a little bit of a wiggle to them, and that's not surprising when it comes to toy safety. Anything that could potentially sort of spike into a sibling or someone else while being flown around. We kind of have these blunter ends, and they are made to bend and break rather than them being solid metal, which could potentially cause harm to someone else. So they do look a little bit like they've got sort of end caps, like when I think about some of the toy blasters that we've had over the years. There's usually some sort of brightly colored sort of cap on the end to indicate that they are a plastic toy and not a real weapon. But then the colors match the ship, so they don't look too clunky and they don't really draw the eye too much. We've got a really nice metallic color here for the main body, and these kind of look like missiles that are kind of slipped in, almost like if this was a larger toy, I'd almost expect to find some sort of firing button that could fire these out. That's kind of fun there, and we can see that those are just sort of attached. We have a seam line running down the side here, so I'm fairly certain that these little plastic elements are attached there, and they'll be sort of held in place with those rivets going all the way through. I really like the fact that the top is just completely free of any of those sort of joints and stuff like that. We know that there are join lines. We can generally see them down the sides, but they do a really good job of sort of hiding everything in the sculpting lines of the ship, so we don't get sort of awkward cut throughs. Just really clever there. So of course we've got a opaque cockpit here. It's not see-through and it doesn't open because this is actually fully metal. We've got some plastic elements, but the cockpits are generally metal on this range, painted with this fantastic gloss black, because unlike some of the vintage die-cast vehicles, we don't have any figures. There is nothing, no detail in the cockpit. This is just solid, and honestly I don't mind the fact that we don't have little figures. I think for the main appeal of this line is the ship itself. We're not looking to sort of put little figures in. It's not really sort of looking for the play element. There are other toy manufacturers and other toy lines that already do that already. I think what Hot Wheels does is really the display piece. People that want a representation of some of the really cool Star Wars ships for their shelf, and these work really well. So I don't need a cockpit that opens or any kind of figures fitting inside. We've got some really nice silver paint for sort of the structure around the windows there. Really nice. Very cool. Okay, so just looking at all of the details here, it's really fun when you've had something on your wish list for so long, particularly with the Hot Wheels line. You don't know which ships are going to be reissued. Is it going to be that one that's missing off your wish list, or is it going to be one that you already had, you know, for quite some time? So I'm just really excited. I've had this one on my hunting list ever since that very first original version of it came out in the wave some time ago. I'm just really excited to finally have it in my hands. We can see the Lucasfilm stamp and the Hot Wheels logo, of course, and we've got that attachment point for the display stand, because of course these are pretty much static objects. Only a few of them have elements that move. The A-wing, of course, we don't have a cockpit that opens, and we don't have any landing gear. That's something for this line. If I want to put it on the display shelf without the stand, it looks a little bit like it's kind of crash landed. It's just kind of pointing down on the nose because we have no sort of display stand to attach, or any kind of one that's built in that we can move, but we've got that attachment point for the stand instead of a landing gear. So I'm just really keen. I want to see it on the display stand. So of course, packed in the underside of the box, we have this extra little box. We can see it contains 2 parts. So let's open it up. So, as I've mentioned, I don't have the original version of this A-Wing. The original Trilogy TIE Fighter and X-Wing had shorter stands when compared to X-Wings and TIE Fighters that were released later on. So I don't have the original one. I am assuming at this point that it is the same height stand, because at number 19, this one was a little bit further through the wave, where I feel like Mattel was getting a better handle on the height that they wanted for their stands. So of course, the base is wrapped up in tissue paper to protect the metallic silver printing here. Of course, like most of the line, we have a faction logo here, the Rebel Alliance or Rebellion Starbird symbol here in silver. And interestingly, this just has A-Wing typed here on the printing. Normally we have a bit more of a name like A-Wing Fighter. That's how it's written on the box. So interesting that they've cut short. I think sometimes they don't want it being too close to the ends of the stand. They want it a little bit more centered there. I have noticed on some of the other vehicles it's a little bit abbreviated in some ways compared to how it is on the box. I was really thinking, because A-Wing is kind of a short name, I thought A-Wing Fighter was going to fit there, so that's kind of interesting to see. And then of course on that front edge we have the Star Wars logo there and the Hot Wheels logo, that flame logo there, just kind of stamped into the front surface there. I really like the stands. So of course we've got the support piece. Let's connect the two together. It's always got a really satisfying click too. Nice and secure. This won't just sort of pull out. Something I really appreciate. There's nothing like picking up a collectible off the shelf and having the sort of stand sort of come apart in your hand. I don't want anything kind of falling apart when I want to move my collectibles. I want them to be secure. We can see that ball-shaped attachment point here. And something I really like is this curved part here. Sometimes you think that the balance would be a little bit off because it's falling forward, but it's pretty good being centered on this base plate here. So let's get this attached. Of course, we've got that point here that we're going to press down on it. It doesn't sort of snap on. I just find that just sort of a good hard press and a little bit of a wiggle. You can see there it's really nice and centered. It grips on it there, and holding it upside down, it doesn't come off, which I really do like. Of course, I can take it off, but it's not going to do it by accident. So if I'm moving them around, I'm not going to accidentally drop a sharp metal A-Wing on my toe if I'm going to move this around. So really nice. And of course, because we have that ball-shaped attachment point, we can move this and get some really cool angles, and we can also rotate it around. We don't have anything kind of protruding from the ship that's going to knock into this. Maybe if we tip it all the way down, that's about as high in the nose that I can get by doing that, but I can tip it down a little bit further because this is just kind of coming into contact here in the back. But I like the fact that we can really get some cool angles there, particularly if you want to have these kind of doing a bit of a galactic battle on your ship display shelf, or maybe you just want them all looking straight. Personally for me, because some of the Star Wars ships are very flat, I like to have their nose tipped down a little bit so I get the surface detail rather than looking at ships kind of dead on when I'm walking by my display shelf. So I like to see that surface detail there. I haven't decided yet if I kind of want mine tipped to the side a little bit like they're in flight. Most of mine are just sort of straight on with a little bit of a tip. And no matter how sort of tipped up, some of them you can get a little bit of a steep angle. Some of them have a lot more mass at the front nose. They never feel like they're going to sort of tip over by themselves because of course they're metal. This one has plastic fins at the back and a little bit more metal towards the front. It still feels really well balanced and looks really cool. I love them, especially because of this curve. Just kind of gives it a bit of a forward momentum, like it's flying in flight, like sort of like motion lines in a comic book. Really nice. The sleek gloss black, that silver logo, it just really sort of makes the whole thing a really cool sort of display package there. Really nice. Oh, I'm so happy to finally have this one in my collection. Looks really cool. And of course, now that I've gone over all of the details and put it on its base, something that I've been really keen to do is do a little bit of a comparison, because if you've watched some of my other videos, you know that I collect the Micro Galaxy Squadron line, and they have released quite a few A-Wings in their line. So I was kind of keen to see these two side by side, because I know a lot of fans are not able to find or collect both lines. So sometimes you kind of have to choose which is the one that I want better or sort of more for my collection. So I have to mention that this one is the original Trilogy A-Wing, or it is labeled as such, but because the Resistance A-Wing was the first version of the A-Wing that the Micro Galaxy Squadron line did, they didn't change up the sculpting for subsequent releases. Harrison Doula's A-Wing uses the same sculpt as the Resistance one, and this is the original Trilogy one, but this one is also the same sculpt as those earlier releases. So I believe it is more of a Resistance sculpt, because I can already see a lot of details. Even of course we've got a bit of difference here in the scale. This one I can see a lot of differences. We've got different laser cannons, and of course the shape of the nose here is very different. This one is longer, the angles are different, and of course this one is plastic. It's very light. We've got a see-through cockpit with a figure inside, which is kind of cool. but the overall tone of the color, when I put these two side by side, it looks very much like a small, thin plastic toy. Unfortunately, this one just looks, I don't know, I might be a little bit biased, but I just really like the way that this one looks. Just with the sort of the weathering, it just kind of, I know we've got a little bit of an overall wash on this one. It just kind of makes it look a little bit grubby, really. I kind of like the washes on the Micro Galaxy Squadron line. You can kind of see it here, but honestly, it just looks like, you know, maybe some kids have been playing with my toys with grubby fingers and it's kind of seeped into the design lines here a little bit. It's not as sort of prominent, obviously, as the printing and the battle damage on this one. Don't get me wrong, I love my Micro Galaxy Squadron line, but sometimes it's interesting to see sort of two ships as a more of a direct comparison, because I know in the back of our mind we might not want to play favorites with our Star Wars collectibles, but I think if push came to shove, we'd be able to pick a favorite here. And if I really saw these two on the store shelf and I had to choose one or the other, if it really came down to it, I think I'd choose the Hot Wheels, to be honest. I love the display stands. I really like the weathering, that rich color, and just the overall presentation. I think it looks really cool. And to be honest, I think this one is a better representation of the original trilogy than this one, which feels a little bit more of a repaint of the sequel trilogy, to be honest. And of course, we don't have a display stand. We just have the landing gear. So it's just kind of sitting here. Of course, that is par for the course for the Micro Galaxy Squadron line. They don't have stands. Most of them don't. So they are all sort of land-based in their sort of landed gear, whereas these ones are in flight mode, which I think just objectively for me is just cooler to have ships, because, you know, back in my sort of Hasbro ship collecting days, it's a little bit hard to collect a lot of Hasbro ships these days. They're very expensive here in New Zealand, but I love suspending them on, you know, fishing line, nylon line, to get them in flight alongside my action figures. I love having them suspended from ceilings. And of course, I don't have to with this Hot Wheels line. Of course, fishing line wouldn't work with these heavy metal die cast. They need their stands, but there's just an elegance to these stands. And it's really incredible for the price point what we get here, because in New Zealand, just to do a quick comparison, these cost me the same price. These ones, there's a few dollars difference, but generally taking into account frequency of toy sales and the different stockists around New Zealand, these two will generally charge me the same. And this is thin, light plastic. I do have a little minifigure and I do have some moving parts. This one is metal and comes with a display stand, and overall just looks a little bit more expensive for the same amount of money, which, you know, is kind of a fun little side perk there. You want your stuff to look cool and look like, you know, the money that you paid for it. And just, I know when it comes down to it, it's just about the enjoyment. You want these physical representations of some of your favorite elements of Star Wars, and I just want to look at my shelf and go, that looks cool. I love A-Wings and I like this A-Wing on my shelf. And that's what this one does, you know. There's a few minor little wobbles there with the paint, because this one does have a lot of weathering, a lot of painted elements. So if you are able to see maybe a couple in person at your local toy store shelf, you might be able to pick out one, because of course it's packaged with so much of that surface visible. You can really see the weathering before you buy, and I'm really happy that I was able to have at least two to look at in person and pick the one that I liked most. And I'm really happy with the weathering pattern on this one. Overall, just fantastic. Really happy to finally have this one in my collection. Still a few more from the original wave that this one was included in that I'm tracking down, because sadly that original wave never arrived here in New Zealand, but I'm really happy that this one was re-released so I could add it to my collection, and I think it looks fantastic. I really like those vibrant colors there. I'm curious to see if we'll see any other variant paint colors of this. We've had a few variants, especially when it comes to X-Wings. We've had a couple of versions there. Maybe we'll see a different color A-Wing in the future. That would be fun. So this has been really fun. I'm always excited to add more to my Hot Wheels Starship Select lineup there for my display shelf. It looks really cool and I can't wait to go add it to my display. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Star Wars collectible, checked out all of the details and had a lot of fun. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon or evening wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again very soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a Hot Wheels Starships Select fan, I recently unboxed the New Republic E-Wing. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole Hot Wheels Starships Select unboxing playlist. This is the way.